The metallic floor of the platform felt cold beneath Tom's boots. The alien executioner, a tall Lunari with heavy shoulders, uncoiled the glowing whip. Sparks of pale blue light danced along its length, humming like trapped lightning. The crowd watched in complete silence. No one dared speak. Even the wind through the high stone arches seemed to have stilled. Tom forced himself to look calm, but his stomach churned. He had never been whipped before, never even been in a real fight outside of training drills, and yet here he was, about to take the full weight of a Lunari punishment meant for someone else. Magor, the high judge, spoke again, his voice low but carrying to every ear. Understand this, human. The shock lash is not like your earth weapons. It will burn your skin and send pain through every nerve. Few Lunari can last 300 strikes. If you collapse before the end, the girl will take the lashes that remain. Are you still willing? Tom kept his eyes steady. Yes. Ren stood just below the platform. Her hands clenched tightly. The glowing restraints had been removed, but two guards blocked her from stepping forward. She looked up at Tom, her silver hair catching the fading light, her expression filled with fear and confusion. You shouldn't do this, she said again, her voice just loud enough for him to hear. Tom gave her a small, lopsided smile. I'll be fine. She shook her head. No, you won't. No one can take this and stand. The executioner positioned himself behind Tom, the whip ready. Magor raised one long-fingered hand. Begin. The first lash cracked through the air with a sound like lightning tearing the sky. It struck across Tom's back with a burning force that made his teeth clench. A sharp, electric shock shot through every muscle. He staggered forward but caught himself before falling. The crowd let out a murmur, some in surprise, others in doubt. 1. Magor counted. Tom took a slow breath. The pain was intense, but he told himself not to think about the number. Just breathe, brace, and take the next one. The second lash came, harder than the first. The blue energy seared into him, making his vision flash white for a heartbeat. He bit down on the inside of his cheek to keep from crying out. 2. By the 10th strike, sweat ran down his face, and his shirt clung to his skin. The burning sensation spread across his back, each lash crossing over the last. His knees wavered, but he stayed upright. Ren's hands trembled as she gripped the edge of the platform every time the whip landed. She flinched as though the pain were hers. The guards beside her exchanged glances, clearly unsure what to make of this strange human who wasn't collapsing immediately. By the 30th strike, Tom's breathing had grown heavy, but his eyes were still steady. He realized he had started counting his breaths between lashes. 1, 2, 3, and bracing at the 4th. It helped him stay in control, if only a little. The executioner's arm never slowed. The whip cracked again and again, each strike, followed by the faint sizzle of energy fading into the air. 50, Magor's voice rang out. Tom's vision blurred for a moment. 50 down, 250 to go. The number almost made him laugh, a dry, humorless sound that stayed trapped in his throat, somewhere in the crowd. A Lunari elder spoke softly to the one beside him. No guilty person would endure this for another. This human, why does he do it? Ren heard those words, and her heart ached. She didn't know why either. She had never met someone like him. By the time the count reached 70, Tom's shirt was torn in several places, thin trails of blood visible beneath the scorch marks. His arms trembled slightly, but he refused to let his knees touch the ground. Magor's expression shifted, no longer pure amusement, but something sharper. As though the human's entrance had unsettled him, Ren looked around the crowd, noticing more people watching with quiet respect now rather than curiosity. Whispers spread about how no Lunari had ever seen a human stand against the shock lash like this. The whip struck again, and Tom stumbled a step forward. Ren's breath caught, certain he would fall. But he caught himself and straightened again. 85, Magor announced. Tom's mind felt heavy. His back burned, each lash adding another layer of pain. Yet something inside him kept him standing. He thought of Ren, her voice when she said she didn't steal. The way her eyes had been wide with fear. That image was enough to keep his Legs moving, enough to make him ready for the next blow. The executioner swung again. The whip curled across Tom's shoulder and side, the shock tearing a grunt from his throat. He tasted blood in his mouth but swallowed it 90. Rin's voice rose suddenly. Stop this. He's had enough. Mager didn't even look at her. He chose this path, and if he survives, the law will judge him worthy. Tom managed to glance toward her between lashes. His voice was hoarse, but steady. Don't worry. I've got this. The 100th lash landed, sending a bright flare of pain through every muscle. The crowd gasped as Tom's knees bent slightly, but he forced himself upright again. 100. Mager said. His voice, though calm, carried a hint of something that might have been respect. Rin stared up at Tom in disbelief. 300. Lashes had seemed impossible, and yet here he was, a third of the way through. Battered but still standing. She didn't know what would happen next. But one thing was certain. This human was not ordinary. And for the first time since her rest, a flicker of hope sparked inside her heart. By the time the 100th lash faded into the evening air, the grand square had changed. The crowd was no longer just curious. They were drawn in, watching closely, whispering about this strange human who refused to fall. Tom stood with his shoulders hunched, his breath uneven, but his feet still firmly planted on the metallic platform. His shirt was torn in half, hanging in loose strips. The alien energy from the whip still tingled and burned across his back. The executioner looked to Mager, perhaps expecting to be told to continue, but the high judge raised a hand for a pause. Hold. Mager commanded. The executioner stepped back, lowering the whip. The murmurs in the square grew louder. Rin looked up sharply. Why are you stopping? Mager slowly descended the short steps from his elevated chair, his long robes brushing the metal floor. His gaze moved from Tom to Rin and then back to Tom again. You have surprised me, human. Few Lunari could take 100 lashes without falling. Tom's chest rose and fell quickly, but he said nothing. He didn't want to waste his energy speaking. Mager's lips curved slightly, not in kindness, but in calculation. I wonder, is this bravery or foolishness? Rin stepped forward. Though the guards moved to block her, it's not foolishness. He's a silence. Mager cut in, his voice sharp. He turned his full attention to Tom. The sentence was 300 lashes. You've taken 100. If you wish to stop now, the girl will take the rest. If you continue, you risk death. The crowd leaned in. This was the choice. This was the moment that would decide everything. Tom lifted his head and met Mager's eyes. His voice was hoarse, but it carried. I said I'd take them all. I'm not stopping. Rin shook her head, her voice urgent. Don't do this. You've done enough already. But Tom ignored her, focusing on Mager. And you know the law, he added. His tone steadied despite the pain. Mager's eyes narrowed slightly. What do you mean? If someone willingly takes another's punishment in full and survives, Tom said, the accused is declared innocent. Ancient Lunari tradition. A ripple of surprise moved through the crowd. Some nodded, remembering the old law, long forgotten by most. Others looked unsettled, as if realizing this human might know more than he should. Rin stared at him in shock. You knew, she whispered. Tom gave her the faintest smile. Maybe. Mager's voice dropped low, though it still carried across the square. That law has not been spoken of in many years. It is not used, but it exists, Tom said, not breaking his gaze. You can't deny it in front of your people. The crowd's murmurs grew into a steady wave. The idea of the old law stirred something, pride, curiosity, maybe even shame, in the Lunari watching. Mager's face was unreadable for a long moment. Finally, he said, very well, human, you may continue. But understand this, the shock lash will not grow lighter, and if you collapse, she will pay the full remainder. The bargain stands. I accept, Tom said. The executioner stepped forward again, his long arms coiling the whip. Rin's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to scream at Tom to stop, to tell him that no one was worth this much pain. But something held her back, because deep down, she didn't want him to stop. The whip cracked again, the sound splitting the air. Tom's body jerked with the impact, the sting spreading through every nerve. 101, Mager called. Tom gritted his teeth and found his breath again. The crowd was different now. Where before they had watched in curiosity or judgment, now they leaned forward, counting along quietly with Mager. Even the guards exchanged glances, their rigid expressions softening slightly. By 120, Tom's legs began to tremble. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, trying to keep his balance. Stay up, Ren whispered under her breath, almost like a prayer. Mager's sharp gaze flicked toward her. You are fortunate, girl. Few would do this for another. Ren met his eyes without fear. And maybe that's why your people should remember that old law. Mager's mouth tightened, but he didn't reply. The lashes continued. 130, 140. Tom's breath came harder, and each time the whip landed, his shoulders shuddered. His back was a patchwork of dark burns and red lines, but he still stood. The square's air grew heavier, the sun dipping lower until shadows stretched across the crowd. The cold metal of the platform pressed into Tom's feet through his boots. At 150, Mager spoke again. Halfway, human. But halfway can be as far as anyone makes it. Tom gave a short laugh, dry and without humor. Guess we'll see. The whip cracked again. By 160, the crowd had begun to murmur differently. Not just about the punishment, but about the meaning of it. A few voices spoke openly now. If he survives, she's free. This is the old way. The council will have to listen. Ren heard them, and her heart beat faster. Maybe this wasn't just about her anymore. Maybe this was about something bigger, about showing the Lunari that mercy and courage could exist alongside law. The lashes went on. Tom's world narrowed to the sound of the whip, the shock of the strike, and the breath between them. At 180, he swayed dangerously, catching himself just in time. The crowd gasped, and Ren's hands flew to her mouth. Still standing, Tom muttered, mostly to himself. Mager's expression was harder to read now. His eyes followed Tom closely, but his jaw was tight, as if he was no longer enjoying the sight. The executioner swung again. The whip curled across Tom's shoulder and side, making his breath catch in his throat. 185. Ren's voice rose above the crowd. Tom, he looked at her, and for a brief second, she saw the pain in his eyes, but also the determination. Don't give up, he said hoarsely. The whip cracked again, and the bargain, dangerous, painful, and now known by everyone in the square, drove them both toward whatever would come next. The two sons of Zirith had almost dipped below the rooftops, leaving the grand square bathed in a dim orange glow. The metallic platform glimmered faintly under the shifting light. Every eye in the crowd stayed fixed on the human boy who stood, battered but unbroken. The executioner adjusted his grip on the glowing whip, its blue sparks crackling in the cooling air. Tom's back was scorched and torn, his breathing slow and heavy. He had taken 185 lashes, and the path ahead was still long. Ren stood at the base of the platform, her eyes locked on him. Her voice was silent now. She had realized that telling him to stop only made him more determined. Instead, she stood there with clenched fists, hoping her presence was enough to keep him steady. Mager's voice rang out, calm but powerful. Continue. The whip cracked through the air, the sound like a thunderclap in the enclosed square. It struck Tom's shoulder with such force that his knees bent for a moment, before he pushed himself upright again. 186. Tom inhaled deeply, forcing his thoughts into order. The pain was no longer sharp, it was everywhere, a constant burn that blurred into a single wave. He told himself not to think about the number. Just the next breath, just the next second, another strike. 187. In the crowd, a young Lunari boy tugged on his mother's sleeve. Why is the human doing this? He asked. His mother, who had watched quietly until now, shook her head slowly. Because he believes she is worth saving. The boy frowned. Would you do that for someone? The mother didn't answer. By 190, Tom's legs shook with every blow. Sweat and blood mixed on his back, and his arms hung heavier at his sides. His breaths came shallow, and his lips were pale. Ren leaned forward, speaking just loud enough for him to hear. "You're close to 200. Just keep standing." Her words were simple, but they cut through the fog in his mind. He lifted his head and gave her a tired but steady nod. The whip cracked again. 195. Somewhere in the square, someone began counting along with Mager, their voice low but clear. 96, 97. Soon others joined, their voices blending together. Tom realized the crowd was no longer silent observers. They were following every strike now, watching each number tick closer to the end. When the whip struck for the 200th time, a cheer rose from somewhere deep in the crowd. It was quickly silenced by the guards, but the energy had shifted. The Lunari had come expecting a simple punishment, but now many were hoping to see the human succeed. Mager's expression tightened, though his voice stayed even. 200. Continue. The next lash hit lower, across Tom's back and ribs. The sting made him gasp before he could stop himself. Ren took a small step forward, her voice tense. "Don't fall now. You've come too far." He managed a half-smile despite the pain. Not planning to. The whip struck again. The force pushed him forward a step, and his boots scraped the metal. His muscles screamed at him to stop, but his mind refused. By 210. The crowd's murmurs grew louder. Snatches of conversation floated to Ren's ears. "He's doing this for her. It's the old law. It's real. If he finishes, the council will have to acknowledge it." Ren's pulse quickened. She glanced at Mager, wondering if he was hearing the same voices and whether they worried him. The lashes continued. Each one sent a flash of heat and pain through Tom's body, but also a burst of stubborn resolve. He thought about Earth, about the stories he had read as a boy, stories of people who stood up when it mattered, even when it hurt. 220-5. His vision swam for a moment. The metallic floor seemed to shift under his feet. He blinked hard and focused on Ren's face in the crowd, her silver hair catching the last threads of sunlight. Her eyes fixed on him as if she could keep him upright by will alone. The whip cracked again. 230. Ren took another step toward the platform, ignoring the guard's warning look. "Tom, listen to me. You've done more than anyone could. You've already changed things. But if you fall..." "I'm not falling," he interrupted, his voice ragged but sure. By 240. The crowd's count grew louder, more certain. Even some guards seemed to be mouthing the numbers under their breath. The square no longer felt like a place of punishment. It felt like a test everyone was invested in. The executioner swung again, his face unreadable. The whip landed hard, but Tom steadied himself almost instantly. 245. Mager watched silently, his eyes narrowing just slightly. He had expected this human to collapse before 100 lashes. Now, he was wondering if he might actually see the ancient law fulfilled before his eyes. Ren didn't care about Mager's thoughts. She cared only about the boy on the platform who was carrying her, sentenced as if it were his own. The whip cracked again. 250. The crowd erupted in quiet cheers that spread like ripples in water. 50 lashes remained. The last stretch was in sight, but Tom knew it would be the hardest. His body was close to its limit, his breathing shallow, his muscles trembling. Still, when he looked at Ren and saw the hope in her eyes, he felt something steady deep inside. He rolled his shoulders, straightened his stance, and waited for the next lash. The crowd waited too, no longer just to see the end of the punishment, but to witness whether this human could truly do the impossible. His square had grown strangely alive. The cold, formal silence that had marked the start of the punishment was gone. Now, every lash landed in the middle of a crowd holding its breath, counting together in low, determined voices. Tom's legs felt like they were made of stone. His back burned with a constant, unrelenting fire, and his arms hung limply at his sides. Every breath came shallow and sharp, but his feet remained planted. The executioner's arm swung again, the whip slicing through the air and striking his shoulder with a spark of blue energy. His vision flashed white for a heartbeat. 251. The crowd murmured. Rin stood so close to the platform now that she could see every tremor in his hands, every drop of sweat sliding down his face. She didn't look away, even when the whip cracked again and his knees bent under the blow. "You're almost there," she whispered. "Don't look at the number. Just keep standing." The next lash fell. 252. Tom inhaled slowly through his nose, forcing his mind to stay calm. If he thought about the 50 lashes left, it would crush him. But if he thought only about the next breath, the next strike, then maybe he could make it. Another strike came, curling across his ribs. The jolt made him stumble forward a half step, and the crowd's murmurs rose. 253. Near the front, a Lunari elder spoke in a voice meant to carry. "Do you all see? This is what courage looks like. This is why the old law was made." More voices joined in. "Free the girl if he finishes. The law is the law, even for the council." Mager's eyes swept across the crowd. He didn't tell them to be silent this time. His jaw was tight, and though his face remained stern, it was clear he could feel the tide of opinion shifting. The whip cracked again, and Tom grunted as the sting burned down his spine. 255. Rin caught his eye for a moment. "You know they're with you now," she said quietly. "You're not alone up there." Tom gave a tiny nod. He had felt it too, the change in the air. The same people who had come to watch someone suffer were now standing behind him. By 260, the crowd's counting was louder, bolder. Even some guards shifted uncomfortably, their eyes flicking to Mager as if questioning how far this would go. The executioner did not slow. Another lash landed, making Tom sway dangerously. Rin took an involuntary step forward, ready to catch him if he fell. But he steadied himself before she could. 265. The sky above had deepened into a darker orange, the sun's dipping lower and casting long shadows over the square. The platform's metal gleamed faintly in the fading light when the whip struck again. Tom clenched his fists and stayed upright. 270. The sound of the crowd's voices filled the air now, matching the rhythm of the strikes. Rin could feel her own heartbeat sensing with the count. Every number was a step closer to freedom. At 275, Tom's knees buckled, and a sharp gasp went through the onlookers. He caught himself on one foot, forcing his body upright again. Rin's breath came fast. She could see how close he was to collapsing. His lips were pale, his breathing ragged, and sweat dripped from his chin. "You're almost there," she whispered urgently. "Just a little more." The whip cracked. 280. The crowd's chant grew louder, as if their voices could hold him up. Some called his name. Others shouted for the law to be honored. Tom's world narrowed to the sound of the whip and the sight of Rin's face in the crowd. The pain was a constant storm, but her eyes anchored him. Another lash. 285. Mager shifted slightly in his seat, his gaze fixed on the human. Whatever his personal feelings, he knew now that if Tom made it to the end, the council would have to answer to the people. At 290. The air in the square was electric. Every eye was locked on the platform, every voice joined in the count. Tom's legs trembled violently now. He could feel the strength leaking from them with every heartbeat. The whip cracked again. 291. Rin's hands tightened into fists. "Come on, Tom, you've done the impossible already. Don't stop now." Another strike. 292. The voices in the crowd rose in volume, almost drowning out the whip's crack. Rin glanced around and saw Lunari she'd never met chatting alongside humans from the exchange program. For the first time, the two species stood as one. Tom's chest heaved. The world tilted slightly under his feet, but he forced himself to steady. 293. Rin's throat felt tight. She wanted to rush to him, to hold him up, but she knew he wouldn't allow it. This was his stand, his choice. Another lash landed, sending fresh fire down his back. 294. Mager leaned forward, his voice loud. 6 remain. The crowd erupted into cheers. Tom straightened his back as much as he could, meeting Rin's gaze. He gave her a faint, tired smile. 6 lashes to go. 6 steps to freedom. The square was quiet now, but not in the way it had been at the beginning. This silence carried electricity. The crowd held its breath for every sound, every movement. Tom's body trembled with exhaustion. Sweat, blood, and bruises marked his back, shoulders, and arms. Every nerve in his body burned with a persistent, aching fire. Still, he stood upright, gripping the edge of the platform for balance. Mager's voice broke the tense quiet. "For lashes remain," he said, his tone colder than before. His dark eyes scanned the crowd, measuring their reactions. He could feel the weight of the old law pressing against him, and even he could sense that the people were ready to rise with the human's courage. Rin stood near the base of the platform, hands clenched tightly. Her silver hair caught the last light of the setting suns, and her heart pounded in her chest. She wanted to rush to him, to pull him down from the platform and end the punishment herself. But she could only watch. Tom's vision blurred slightly, but he fixed his gaze on Rin. "Almost there," he whispered, mostly to himself, mostly to give both of them strength. The executioner raised the glowing whip, and a sharp crack split the air as the 29th strike landed. Tom swayed forward, nearly losing his footing, but he forced himself upright again. "To 196, Mager announced. Rin gasped, her hands tightening into fists. "Just for more," she muttered. Her voice, soft but firm, seemed to carry across the square. Tom's head lifted at the sound, and he gave her a small, determined nod. The crowd had shifted now. Where before they had only whispered and counted, now they were watching with open awe. Many Lunari elders, some council members, and even guards were leaning forward, murmuring in disbelief. A human standing through this, for someone else, was something no one had ever witnessed before. The whip struck again, curling across Tom's back. The sting was sharp, electric, and relentless. He gritted his teeth, biting down on the pain, letting it fuel him instead of breaking him. 297, Mager called. Rin's heart beat faster. She could see every tremor in Tom's legs, every flinch from the whip, but he didn't collapse. He didn't fall. He stood upright, breathing heavily, his fingers clenched at his sides. 3 remain, Mager said. His voice carried a strange mixture of disbelief and respect. He could not deny that the human had endured far beyond any expectation. The executioner swung again. The whip lashed across Tom's shoulder and side, making him stumble, but he caught himself just in time. 298, the judge said. Rin's eyes filled with tears. She could hardly believe it. Her mind raced. Could he actually survive the last 2? Could he make it all the way? She wanted to cry out, but instead she whispered, "Just one step at a time. You can do it." Tom's voice was hoarse when he replied, "Almost there, almost." The next lash landed with a crack that echoed across the square. He felt the last remnants of strength in his legs and shoulders quivering. For a brief moment, he felt like he might collapse, but his eyes stayed locked on Rin's. Her presence gave him the will to push through. 299, Mager said. Only one lash remained. The crowd leaned forward as if they could help him through this final strike. A wave of murmurs rose, not in warning or judgment, but in hope. The whip arced through the air for the last time, its blue sparks dancing in the dim light of the suns now dipping fully behind the city's towers. Tom felt the strike across his back, and the burning fire spread, making his knees bend under the pain. But before he could fall, Rin reached up instinctively and caught him, her hand steady even though her heart raced. He swayed, heavy and exhausted, but she held him upright. The crowd erupted. Some shouted his name, others cheered for Rin, and many clapped and waved their arms in awe. This human had done the impossible. He had survived all 300 lashes meant for another. Mager's eyes narrowed, but his mouth tightened into a line. He had no choice but to follow the law. Slowly, deliberately, he raised his hand. By the law of the Lunari Empire, the accused is hereby declared innocent. The human who stood in her place has fulfilled the conditions of the ancient law. Rin of the lower quarter is free. Rin's knees weakened slightly as she realized what was happening. Relief washed over her, and she hugged Tom instinctively, Holding him tightly against her despite his weight and weakness, Tom sagged slightly against her. Exhausted beyond anything he had ever experienced, his breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. Ren held him steady, whispering, "It's over. You did it. You saved me." The crowd's cheers grew louder, echoing across the square and into the surrounding streets. People who had come to watch a punishment now celebrated courage, mercy, and human endurance. Even some of the guards who had once stood rigid now smiled or nodded quietly, acknowledging the humans' extraordinary bravery. A few council members muttered to each other, realizing that the law they had long considered absolute might need revaluation. Mager stepped down from his platform slowly. His robes brushed the ground as he approached Tom and Ren. His eyes were dark, unreadable. But there was a weight in his gaze, a mixture of grudging respect and acknowledgement. "You have changed something today," he said, his voice steady, "but not unkind. Few have the courage to stand as you did. The council will remember this." Ren looked up at him, still holding Tom's arm. "It's not just courage," she said softly. "It's choice. He chose to do what was right." Tom let out a shaky laugh. "I just didn't want to watch you suffer." Mager's lips tightened, but he said nothing further. He gestured to the executioner, who carefully set down the whip. The blue sparks faded into the air, leaving only the metallic sheen of the platform. The crowd began to disperse slowly, though many lingered to talk among themselves. News would spread quickly, stories of a human taking the place of an alien, of enduring 300 lashes, of surviving against all odds. Ren and Tom remained on the platform. For a few quiet moments, holding onto each other, she could feel the weight of the day, the pain he had endured, and the incredible courage it had taken to survive. "I can't believe you did it," she whispered again. Tom smiled weakly, his lips cracked and pale. "I didn't have a choice. I couldn't let them hurt you for something you didn't do." Ren shook her head, tears glistening in her silver eyes. "You've changed everything here. Not just for me, for everyone who was watching." Tom let out a quiet breath, finally allowing his body to relax fully. The pain was still there, but it no longer consumed him. Together, they stepped down from the platform, supported by Ren's hands and the crowd's cheering energy. It was over, and in the hearts of the Lunari who had watched, and in the memory of the human boy who had stood unwavering, a new story of courage, mercy, and hope had been written, one that would be told for generations. The crowd slowly dispersed from the grand square, their whispers carrying tales of what they had witnessed. The story of the human boy who had taken 300 lashes meant for an alien girl would spread far and wide, even those who had doubted. The old law now spoke of courage, mercy, and the bond between two worlds. Tom leaned heavily on Ren as they walked away from the platform. Each step sent a sharp reminder of the pain that still lingered across his back and arms. He winced, but he refused to complain. Ren's steady grip on his arm kept him upright. "You really didn't have to do all of that," Ren said softly, her voice full of awe. "You could have stopped after the first 100, or even halfway." Tom shook his head, a weak smile on his lips. "If I had stopped, you would have paid the rest. I couldn't let that happen. You didn't deserve it." Ren's silver hair shimmered in the fading light. She looked at him with deep gratitude, mixed with disbelief. "You saved me. You saved my life. And more than that, you've changed how everyone will see this law, this punishment." Tom's lips quivered in a small smile. "I guess sometimes people need to see that mercy can be stronger than fear." They reached the edge of the square, where a group of citizens and guards waited to help. Some brought water and blankets. Others quietly offered words of respect. Tom nodded to them, exhausted but filled with a quiet pride. Ren stepped closer, helping him to a nearby bench. She lowered him carefully and then crouched to examine the damage. His back was a map of burns and cuts, but he had survived. He had endured more than any Lunari or any human had ever expected. "You're amazing," she whispered, brushing a loose strand of hair from his forehead. I don't know how to thank you." Tom gave her a tired laugh. "You don't need to thank me. Just live, stay safe. That's enough." As they rested, Mager approached them. His long robes brushed the ground, and his face was calm but unreadable. He stopped a few feet away and bowed slightly, a rare gesture of respect. "You have done what no Lunari could," he said, his voice steady. "You have reminded us that courage and choice matter, and that ancient laws exist for a reason. Rin of the lower quarter is free because of you, and you, human, will be remembered." Tom nodded, humble but exhausted. "Thank you." Mager's eyes lingered on the boy for a moment longer. Then he turned and walked back toward the platform, leaving Tom and Rin to recover. For the next hours, Rin and Tom sat together in quiet reflection. She brought him water, helping him sip slowly. The pain was still sharp, but the relief of survival made it bearable. As the sun fully set and the sky turned a deep violet, Rin finally spoke. "Do you know what your actions mean? People who once feared the law will now question it. Leaders who thought cruelty was unquestioned will think again. And everyone will know that humans are capable of more than we imagined." Tom leaned back, exhausted but smiling faintly. "I didn't do it to change laws. I just couldn't let someone suffer for something they didn't do. But if it helps, then I guess that's a good side effect." Rin laughed softly, a sound full of relief and admiration. "You really are different from anyone I've ever met. Maybe the world will be different too, because of people like you." Over the following days, the stories spread across Xerath. People spoke in markets, schools, and council halls about the human who had taken the punishment for an alien. They told of his courage, his endurance, and his unshakable sense of justice. Even the younger Lunari began to speak differently. Where once they had only followed rules out of fear, they now whispered of bravery, of standing for others, and of hope. The old law, long forgotten, became a symbol, not of punishment, but of the power of choice and courage. Rin and Tom spent their days together, helping those in need and speaking with citizens curious about the events in the square. Rin began to understand how one person's courage could ripple across an entire society, changing minds and hearts. Tom's injuries healed slowly, but each day brought him more strength. He learned about Lunari customs, stories, and history from Rin and the people around them. Though exhausted, he felt alive in a way he never had before, proud not just for surviving, but for standing for someone else. One morning, as the suns rose together over the city, Rin and Tom stood on a high terrace overlooking the square where the punishment had taken place. The platform was empty now, but the memory of what had occurred lingered in the air like an echo. "You know," Rin said quietly, "people will always remember this day. They'll tell their children and grandchildren about a human boy who stood for justice and mercy, not because it was easy, but because it was right." Tom looked at the rising suns, feeling the warmth on his face. "I hope they remember it for more than just me," he said. "I hope they remember that anyone can stand up for others, no matter who they are." Rin smiled, placing her hand on his shoulder. "They will. And maybe humans and Lunari can be closer because of you, because of what you did." Tom nodded. "Maybe. I just did what anyone should do. I couldn't leave you to suffer. That's all." Together, they watched the city awaken under the golden light, the streets filled with people beginning their day. The harsh laws that had once ruled with fear now felt softer in the hearts of the citizens. And in the quiet between the rising suns, Tom and Rin knew they had changed more than just one life. They had started a new dawn for an entire world. As the wind carried the sounds of life across the city, Rin whispered, "Thank you for standing for me, for all of us." Tom smiled, exhausted but peaceful. "And thank you for believing I could. That's what made it possible." The square below would remain a place of memory, a place of courage, and the story of a human boy who stood in the face of unimaginable pain and refused to give up for another would live forever in the hearts of the Luna Ri. In that moment, as the suns rose higher and the city stirred to life, a new era quietly began, one of courage, mercy, and hope. And together, Tom and Rin stepped forward into that dawn, ready to face whatever the future might bring. The hall was quiet except for the low hum of the air filters. Human soldier Markle stood still, his posture straight, as the Varillian elders watched him with unreadable expressions. Their eyes were a shade of deep silver, reflecting the pale lights above. This was not a battlefield. This was something stranger. A marriage ceremony between a human soldier and a Varillian ambassador's daughter. Markle had fought in 3 border campaigns. He had seen enemy ships burn and planets evacuated under fire, but he had never expected his life to lead him here in a hall of smooth stone and glowing murals. Exchanging vows into different languages at once, his bride, Talia, was calm and poised. Her violet-toned skin caught the light like polished crystal. Her voice was soft but certain as she spoke the final words in her people's tongue. Markle repeated them carefully, his accent awkward, but his intent clear. When the ceremony ended, there was polite applause. It was not the wild cheer of a human celebration. Varillian joy was quieter, more restrained. Still, Markle could sense approval in the nods and faint smiles. For the Alliance, this marriage meant trust. For Markle, it meant a future he had not planned, but one he was willing to accept. That evening, they sat together in the small private chamber assigned to them. The room was half human style, half Varillian, a strange mix of steel panels and soft, glowing curtains. A small table between them held 2 cups of warm leaf brew, steaming gently. Talia studied him for a moment, as if measuring his mood. "You have been silent," she said. "Do you regret this union?" Markle shook his head. "No, I'm just thinking. This is a big change. For both of us." Her gaze softened. "Yes, and it is why I must ask you something important. Something that will not be easy." Markle raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" She hesitated, her hands curling around the cup. "I have a younger sister. Her name is Lyri. She is clever, and her spirit is strong. But she has never been beyond the royal courts. She has never faced the true world." Markle listened quietly. The way Talia spoke carried weight. This wasn't casual family talk. "I want you to help her," Talia said at last. "I want you to give her what our people cannot experience in the human way." Markle leaned back slightly. "Experience? You mean training?" "Yes," Talia said, "in your methods, in survival, in leadership. She will not be allowed to serve on the Joint Defense Council unless she proves herself capable. But the elders, they would never let her learn from a human. It is forbidden." That word forbidden made Markle frown. "Then why are you asking me?" "Because," Talia's eyes held his steadily, "you are my husband now, and because you will not twist her mind, only strengthen it. I believe she needs your way of thinking. If she is to survive in the future we are building." Markle was silent for a moment. His soldier's mind weighed the risk. Training a royal Varillian was not like training a new recruit. If the elders found out, they could accuse him of influencing their leadership. They could call it interference. "You realize," he said slowly, "this could cause trouble for you, and for me." "I realize," Talia replied, "but trouble will come anyway if we remain divided. Lyri is bright, but she does not yet know the weight of command. You can give her that understanding." Markle looked into her eyes. There was no hesitation there, only certainty. The next morning, Markle walked through the Varillian gardens. Tall, silver-leaf plants swayed under the artificial breeze. Beyond the curved glass of the dome, the stars glittered. Talia's request stayed in his mind. He remembered young human soldiers he had trained, some full of raw energy, some timid, all shaped by the field. Experience was not a thing you could simply explain. You had to live it. Still, training a royal alien princess was another matter. Entirely. One wrong step, and politics could crush them both. When he returned to the chamber, Talia was waiting, her posture formal. "Lyri will meet you tomorrow," she said simply. "I have told her nothing of my request, only that you will speak with her." Markle nodded. "I'll talk, but no promises." Her lips curved slightly. "I only ask that you see her for yourself." The following day, Markle stood at the entrance to the gardens again. The air carried a faint scent of something sweet, like starlight and rain. Footsteps approached, light, measured, and almost silent. A young Varillian woman appeared. She was smaller than Talia, with sharper features and bright, curious eyes the color of deep ocean. Her long hair, braided in the Varillian style, shimmered with a faint silver hue. She bowed in the Varillian way, then straightened. "You are Markle, the human soldier," she said. "That's right," Markle replied. "My sister says you fought at the border of fire," Lyri said. "Is it true you once led a squad through an asteroid field under pursuit?" Markle gave a short nod. "It's true, but survival isn't just about daring. It's about discipline. You know why I'm here." She tilted her head. "To speak with me." "That is all," she said. Markle studied her for a moment. She was alert, but her hands were to clean. Her stance relaxed. She had never carried weight over distance. She had never gone without food or water for days. She had never been under fire. "Your sister wants you to gain experience," he said. "My way." Lyri's eyes widened slightly. "That would be unusual, and forbidden," Markle said. "Do you want it?" There was a pause. Then she smiled faintly. "If it will prepare me for the future." "Yes, I want it." Markle gave a slow nod. "Then we start soon. But understand, this will not be like the lessons you've had in the palace. My way is not easy." "I would expect nothing less," Lyri said calmly. As they stood there under the silver leaves, Markle realized the path ahead would be dangerous, not because of battle, but because of the politics and customs they were about to challenge. Talia's request was no longer just a favor between husband and wife. It was the beginning of something that could change the balance between humans and Virillians. And it all started tomorrow.